Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
One of America's top radio personalities, Jim Bohannon, brings his wit, wisdom, and natural charm to listeners on Guam. Voted one of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America, The Jim Bohannon Show brings listeners a unique blend of breaking news, interesting features, and a Sunday morning bonus show from 6 to 9 a.m. Jim Bohannon on Guam's only news talk superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
CIA is a man with a gun. Quarters late Monday. FBI agent
was involved earlier in the day and had just outside, emerging from his, and he was officers who opened, man taken to a hospital. They're not saying how identified him.
Massive highway crash outside. One person dead.
Multiple 18-wheeler vehicles disabled. Some completely totaled.
Dallas on the scene near Waxahachie. Of the tractor trailers appeared to have been I-35E. There had been multiple reports of tornadoes in the. Two people were killed by trees on Monday. A railway bridge in Mexico City has collapsed, plunging a commuter train, smashing several vehicles. Mexico City's mayor says 15 people have been killed and scores have been injured. They are trapped in cars. The FDA will consider lowering the age for the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine. 12.
Possible will be inoculated against the coronavirus start of the next school year. But more than 2,600 people aged 12 to 15 who were given the Pfizer vaccine showed no cases of COVID-19. The kids had side effects similar to those of adults. In addition, the FDA is allowing both Pfizer and Moderna to begin studies in the U.S. on children 11 years old and younger to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Karen McHugh, Fox News.
America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The state of Florida getting ready to lift all of its coronavirus restrictions.
The bill signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis ends COVID restrictions statewide effective July 1st. This means an end to all mask mandates, business and school closures. But he also signed executive orders to end COVID restrictions before the July date, saying these orders will bridge that gap. Private businesses can still have their own mask mandates and other rules, but counties cannot have them. Democratic leaders are highly critical. The mayor of St. Petersburg said local county measures saved the state, asking, could you imagine what the death toll would be and where the economy would be without local county measures? The new law also bans so-called vaccine passports. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
India's COVID-19 crisis continues with deaths and infections still mounting at an alarming rate. They've surpassed 20 million total reported cases, but experts believe the the number may be much higher because of troubles in the country's healthcare system, which is running out of supplies. Ohio State University says in new court filings it's planning an individual settlement program that could help resolve more of the remaining claims over alleged sexual misconduct by former team doctor Richard Strauss, the now deceased doctor accused of abusing hundreds of young men during his 2 decades at OSU. The school has already reached nearly $47 million in settlements for 185 plaintiffs. The country's top military commander dropping his opposition to a plan to change the way sexual assault cases in the military are handled.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says he is open to considering changes in how the military decides sexual assault prosecutions. In an interview with the Associated Press, Milley did not endorse specific changes but dropped opposition, saying the military hasn't effectively moved the needle. Bipartisan legislation in the Senate would move decision-making power on whether to bring sexual assault charges out of the hands of commanders. A Defense Department advisory panel is recommending similar changes. Jared Halbert, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's what I say every day, and I'm going to keep saying it every day. We like to think that our United States Constitution is sort of self-executing, that all we have to do is pick it up and read it once in a while. Doesn't require any activity on our part to make sure that it continues to be the benchmark of our country. Just not so. And I'm doing my share because I talk about it every day. And I hope that everyone out there in our international radio listening audience is following suit. So trying to get Facebook on my desktop here. As soon as I get it set up, I'm going to go straight to Zemi Ikotny. Yeah, give me a second here. I know it's kind of quiet out there if I'm not saying something, so I'm going to keep talking. Once again, I'm trying to get into Facebook here in our high-tech studio, and it's not always that easy. Still trying. The reason it's important is because I want to be able to pick up on all of your witty comments and pithy undertakings during the time that I'm on the air here. So I don't quite understand. I never liked Facebook. I finally got it. Okay. I finally got it. Facebook seems to always want to teach me that it is boss rather than, well, anyhow, we're ready to go now. And so Sandra Regis is here, Lynn McAfee, Emmanuel John Uggan, Rico Blancafor. Yeah, so we got a pretty good gang here to start the show. So I'm going to start right out with Zemi Ikotny. Yeah, once again, I think we got something that would have made a fair news story. As today, it's an editorial. The pandemic unemployment assistance is winding down in Guam Department of Labor. Director David Del Isla, he's not really the director of the Department of Labor. He is the director of labor, but says that the agency has been seeing an anecdotal decrease in claimants as individuals slowly but surely return to work. Quote, as the island opens up, more people are increasing their reduced hours, and other people are also being called back to work. Businesses are starting to open up, so we'll start seeing, hopefully, a trend of decline. Mike San Nicolas warned that federal aid for unemployment was likely to sunset this coming September as economic conditions improve stateside. That means saying goodbye to a nice chunk of free federal money for thousands of residents. That, in turn, means all those receiving unemployment will need to find work. Hopefully. You just can't get over using the word hopefully wrong, right? They can't cure themselves of that. Guam's local industries, businesses, and various educational programs have launched training programs and job fairs to help expand employment. See what I mean? It's just really a news story rather than an editorial. The best thing about these programs is that many translate to a job at completion or a certificate that makes it easier to find work. Del Isla said those on unemployment should take advantage of these programs. We're coming to near the end of the tunnel, so we're starting to see the light. Del Isla also said employers need to continue to use the Hire Guam website to post job listings, reminding me that Drive-Through Jack asked, why aren't government jobs posted on the Hire Guam website? Good question. And then the punchline of the editorial, kudos to the Guam Department of Labor, its training partners, etc., and we urge those receiving unemployment aid to take advantage of these many, So if you didn't have time to read the editorial today, don't waste the time. And then we go to the Post. And the Post is like a ship that sails straight out to sea most of the time, but then something must happen. Maybe some sort of magnetic disturbance upsets its compass, and it starts listing hard to the port. Hard a port. And today is another example. The headline, Federal Reform may help middle-class students to realize collegiate dreams. Now keep that phrase, federal reform, in mind as I go through the editorial and see what the Post thinks federal reform means. I start out by saying, folks across the island are having tough decisions about what to do after high school. High school graduation is a culmination of more than a decade of education spending, but now the massive big-ticket college spending will soon begin, etc. The rhetorical question, will our graduating high school seniors be able, with the help of family, grants, scholarships, and probably some loans, to get through the years of study and the tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars to obtain the degree they're aiming at? college costs have been disproportionately skewed against middle-income students. Students in the middle class typically fall out of eligibility for a lot of the so-called, quote, free stuff, or federal financial aid that tends to go to low-income households and the rich. That tends to go to low-income households, all of the stuff, the social welfare stuff. And the rich, well, they only have to worry about getting accepted to their dream school. This is the time of the year when middle-class families of college-bound students realize how it sucks to fall economically between having too much and not enough money after having worked hard to get to this point of the economic ladder. Middle-class families will make choices on what to save and what to give up to support their college aspirations. Families might have to decide to compromise their student's dream or put it on hold to match the financial reality. Hopefully, things will change for the next batch of middle-class graduates. Now, here comes the reform. Remember I told you to tie that or make a note about federal. Here comes federal reform. It looks like the White House is cognizant and will try to get Congress to support a massive plan that includes helping students afford higher education. President Joe Biden unveiled the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan, which, among other things, proposes 2 free years of community college for millions of Americans, lower college costs for low and middle income students at historically black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and institutions such as Hispanic serving institutions, Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institutions, and other minority serving institutions, an increase to approximately up to 1,400 and Pell Grants. And I'm going to stop there for a second. Now, where's the reform there? That is not reform, Mr. Headlight Writer. That is called ex gratia social welfare payments. It's not reform. And it's not socialism either, if that's the word you're looking for. The proposal also goes on a $9 billion investment to strengthen teacher pipelines and address shortages, increase the number of teachers of color, and support the growth of teachers. Yeah, I wish they'd have had this one when I was a teacher. You know, maybe I could have put on a couple more inches and been a professional basketball player. I was 6'4" when I started. Maybe I guess they would have overlooked me. Universal access to high-quality, free pre-kindergarten, for 3 and 4-year-olds, so working parents can stay in the workforce and reduce their reliance on costly childcare. Ensure no one earning under 150% of state median income has to pay more than 7% of their income on high-quality care for children under 5. And provide comprehensive paid family and medical leave, allowing workers to take the time they need to care for a new child, their own serious illness, or seriously ill loved ones. Biden's plan has yet to officially become legislation, but is already getting resistance, as expected by some on the Republican side of the aisle of the Congress. Oh, those Republicans. They just don't get it, do they? So here's what we got. We're talking about all this free stuff, which means that professors, people who teach at community colleges, are not going to draw their paychecks. They're saying, we're going to be participating in this reform, so we're going to work for free. and the child care folks and the preschool folks are all going to work for nothing, right? Wrong. How often is there such a thing as a free lunch? Never. So what we've got here is statism writ large. Now, the Post even goes on to jump on the bandwagon here by criticizing, of course, a Republican. Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Texas, set the tone in Fox Business Network. Where else? Wednesday, hours after Biden released his plan, she argued the proposals would incentivize women to rely on the federal government to organize their lives. Well, I don't know the thing about organizing lives. I got it straight from attorney Vanessa Williams. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. So what we need is the government to help Vanessa and the others make that choice.
I have a feeling they left that part out in this op-ed.
Yeah, really. It favors those who want power and control over every single minute of your day. It's disgusting, Blackburn is quoted in the Washington Post. Now, but the Post rebuts what Marsha Blackburn says by coming back like this. The free college idea, by the way, is for those who want it. The plan does not force students to go to college, but it does force taxpayers to pay for it. Well, Republicans have made clear they see no role for the federal government in further supporting child care, community college, or employer leave. A small group of GOP lawmakers have floated alternative plans that would pay cash directly into bank accounts of American parents to spend as they wish. Even Republicans don't get it. It looks like the idea of helping the families, working families, that is, isn't exclusive to Biden, so long as he can do it with somebody else's money. If both finds a middle ground, at least so that the middle class does not slip through the cracks, maybe families will have fewer worries around high school graduation time next year. Now here comes the real statement from the Post. If only politics will get out of the way. If only. So we could just give all this money away.
Then you wouldn't have an op-ed.
Really. So, it just comes down to this. The more money the government gives away, the deeper in debt we are, or the more taxes you're going to have to pay. So if I were Marsha Blackburn, and she probably did explain this, if she said, lower the tax burden and people will make these decisions for themselves, raise the taxpayer burden, and they don't have any choice. So it's the classic, Hillary Clinton's famous, it takes a village to raise a child. What Hillary Clinton is thinking of is State Child Care Center number 142. Okay, your child is 3 years old. You can't raise them anymore. You've got to send them, meaning one child, to State Child Care Center number 132. And right on up the ladder. So there's no individual choice. You take the parents right out of it. First, you take the parents' money, then you give it to the state, then you let the state provide all these free things, and then you set it up so that parents really don't have a choice. It's called statism, and it's ugly, 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 ugly. Now, fortunately, I went to school when they taught kids how to read. I don't know if kids... I really don't know. If they can't watch a video on their phone, I don't think kids know how to read. So one of the things that I read, and I continue to read, is Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. And that's the section of the Constitution that tells you what the powers of the national government are. It goes like this. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. And this section here, this language here, I'll come back to in the insular cases. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So the United States can borrow money on the credit of the United States, regulate commerce with the foreign nations among the several states and with Indian tribes, establish a uniform rule of naturalization and a uniform rule for bankruptcy, coin money, regulate the value of in a foreign coin, provide for the punishment of counterfeiting, provide for the punishment of counterfeiting, even in Minneapolis. Believe it or not. Counterfeiting is illegal in Minneapolis. That's a little-known fact, right? The Congress can establish post offices and post roads, promote science and the arts, constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high sea, declare war, raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, make rules for the government and regulation of land and naval forces, provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, provide for organizing a militia, exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over the district not to exceed 10 miles square, called the District of Columbia, that's the capital, etc. Those are the powers of the national government. Did you see anything in there about nursery schools, community colleges, or any of the rest of this garbage that the statists, meaning Joe Biden, are proposing? No.
Nope.
It's just not there. And it's not there for a reason, because that's not the job of the national government. Now, you hear me talking national government and mentioning that you shouldn't use the term federal government because we don't have a federal government anymore. We did it one time, but the statists took it away from us, and now we have a national government. The attitude of those on the left is we have a national government and 50 administrative districts called states. And the national government has got to get right down to what you do with your 3-year-old. This is horrible. And, of course, the Post is right in there with them, right? Now, there is one Guam dimension to this, and I'll say this. Of course, this is all money coming out of the federal treasury. And the federal treasury is broke. We're up to the point where we are spending more money every year. We're spending 109% of our gross national product every year. We're going into debt every year. We are now $30 trillion in debt. The share of the national debt of every oscillating Richard in the United States is about $70,000. And we can't spend it fast enough. We're going to spend it faster if we possibly can. So none of this stuff is free, and we're taking, being so careful for the children. It's not going to be your grandchildren that's paying this. Probably not even your great-grands. It's going to be your great-great-grands that are going to get stuck with this debt. And it's all for statism, so that the folks in the national government can control your life right down to the point where if little Johnny wants to pee, he can use any restaurant and any restroom, and he can go in that restroom that used to say girls if he wants to. And we're going to support all this stuff. We're going to spend all this money, and in the process, those administrative districts lose almost all of their ability to do what they're supposed to do. And in the process, you lose most of your freedom. And we can't get there fast enough. Now, this territorial dimension is this. When the national government is giving away all of this money from the federal treasury, we have a really wonderful situation because we don't put any in. We just take the money out. We have a slot machine. We don't ever put a nickel, a quarter in the slot machine. We pull the handle and money comes out, and we never put money in. So in that respect, I suppose the more money the feds spend, the better for us. If you put aside all your principles and all you're interested in is the money, then that's the way it goes. But we're trying really hard to ruin that, as I'll get to later on in the card. We want to have the insular cases, primarily Downs versus Bidwell, overturned by the Supreme Court. In fact, the legislature, they're even writing a letter to the Chief Justice, and I'll bet when they get our resolution, they'll go into some kind of a special session to deal with it. If Downs versus Bidwell were overturned, were overruled, that's where the that's the key insular case. It would mean that Guam would then become an incorporated territory. All of our taxes would go straight to the national treasury. No more of this mirror image keeping the money here. No more Section 30 money. No more duty-free port. No more GITA qualifying certificates. So then we'd get money back from the Treasury, but we'll probably be sending more in than we'd ever get back. And Guam Daily Post, I depend on you to kind of keep a lookout for things like this. I haven't been able to depend on the Daily News since Lee Weber left. They've turned hard left ever since Lee Weber left. But I kind of have high hopes for you, and most of the time you get it right. But 2 days in a row now, you've gotten it wrong. So come on, Daily Post, buck up on this stuff here, okay? All right, let's see who we've got here. Who wants to agree with, in the green room, that wants to agree with me? Let me just take a look here. Oops. Yeah, it's R. Carl. Okay, well, I've got R. Carl, and then R. Carl, I got to take a short break. So tell me about statism, R. Carl.
Yeah, Bob, I just wanted to chime in that this is one of those classic examples of government, big government, riding up in shining armor on a white steed to rescue us from something that they actually created. And I'm talking about the explosion in the cost for education. I'm sure you remember the days when college was very affordable. It was very common for people to... As a matter of fact, Carl, when you and I are done, I'm going to give a biographical example of how the government did that. Go ahead. Yeah, it was very common for people to work part-time and work their way through college and not end up with zero debt at the end. And what happened is the government decided to, quote, help the people. When they come to your door and say they're going to help, you better hold on to your wallet because something is going to happen. And what they did is the unintentional consequences of that is they removed all the incentive to contain the costs of college. The incentive became to capture as much of the subsidies as they could. And one of the ways that this money was used is because they wanted to compete with the other colleges to get more college students there, to get more subsidies, and so they had to kind of dress up the campus, Olympic pools, rock climbing walls, food courts, all those things that are essential to the mission of education. Yeah, what do they think they were, the Air Force, Carl? Yeah, exactly. Oh, ouch. And then there's the matter of the extremely high professorial salaries in some cases. I heard of the example of Elizabeth Warren. She was actually being paid over $400,000 a year to teach one class. Boy, that's a lot of wampum. Yeah, exactly. That is huge. And then there's the matter of the diversity administrations that have been created since the 60s. And, these are extremely highly paid positions, and they've proliferated especially since the 60s. So in total, the total government-backed debt that students have on their backs is a mountainous $1.6 trillion. And this amounts to one of the greatest wealth transfers in American history, away from taxpayers who have to pay for this stuff, and into the pockets of administrators and professors and college campuses. So it's been tragic, and I'm glad you brought up that thought about who's going to pay for this. You bring that up many times, and you stole my thunder. Who's going to pay for it is our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and our great-great-great-grandchildren. And in fact, they probably won't be able to pay for it. The debt right now, the total national debt's about $28 trillion plus. I saw an article recently where it stated that probably the actual debt is over $125 trillion when you count the unfunded mandates. That will never be paid off. At some point, this thing is going to implode. And, it's unfortunate, but that is the reality. At some point, just the interest on this debt will swallow up our entire gross national product, and we might already be there as far as reaching the point of no return. So this insanity, this is like people sliding down the edge of a mountain to a cliff, and instead of trying to stop, they're actually greasing the skids. It's craziness. It's absolutely insane. Anyway,
yeah,
Bob,
well, this guy jumped off the top of the Empire State Building, and his buddy was halfway down and stuck his head out of the window and says, "Hey, Stosh, how's it going?" Stosh says, "So far, so good." Got to take a break, Carl, but thanks for calling.
Okay, Bob. Thanks for allowing me to blow off a little steam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified, serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, I mentioned when I was chatting with Carl that I would give an autobiographical example of what's happened to college costs. Yeah, when I started college back in 1956 in the States, a state school, a classic American state college, started out as Whitewater Normal, meaning it was a teacher training institute. Then it became Whitewater State Teachers College, and then it became Wisconsin State College at Whitewater. Now it's the University of Wisconsin, Whitewater. And it wasn't fancy. It certainly wasn't the Ivy League. And by flashing my diploma, I wasn't able to get a job on Wall Street. But it was a good, solid, basic education. And it cost $71.50 a semester. Yeah, now Now, $1 in 1956 went a lot farther than $1 goes today. I think the minimum wage in those days was $1, right? But anybody, any kid that wanted to go to school could scrape together $71.50 a semester.
Was this back when everything looked black and white and wasn't colored yet?
There was no, the world was black and white. TV was black and white. The world was black and white. Yeah. Yeah, those were the days. So any kid that wanted to go to college could. And like Carl said, an awful lot of kids, myself included, when we went to college, I tended bar to get myself through college. Unfortunately, at the time, an environment that I felt rather comfortable in, but that's another story, another tall tale. Yeah, so, and that was not uncommon at all. And then during the summer, you know, kids would go out. If you really lucked out, you got a job working construction. And one summer, I got a job working construction on a new courthouse in my hometown that paid $2.80 an hour.
Outrageous.
It was. I mean, it was like striking it rich.
Oh, okay.
It was. I mean, it was really high pay. And my situation was hardly different from anybody else's. We were average kids. We were middle-class kids. We worked. We saved our money. We could pay the tuition. We could, there was a book locker. You checked out your books. You didn't even need to pay for your books. You could buy a $5.85 meal ticket at Baskin's restaurant for $5. Punch it, yeah. Cheap meals on campus, the whole thing. So a middle-class kid could afford to go to college. When I got my master's degree here at the university, of course, I was living at home, about the same thing. When I was able to head off for college, for law school at University of New Mexico, even though I was paying non-resident tuition, it was only like $1,200 a semester. So it was still really affordable for middle-class kids. But what happened? Well, we came along with Pell Grants. And a Pell Grant is some free money from the national government that goes to people who, there's a means test, and they use that to pay their tuition, of course. Well, the universities pretty quickly caught on, and they figured, well, if our tuition is $200 a semester, and these kids are getting $1,000 Pell Grants, well, then we can charge $1,200. So the more money the feds poured into it, the higher the tuition went. And the higher the tuition went, the higher the salaries went, the more boondoggles that arose, diversity offices and all the rest of this stuff, to the point that nobody can afford to go to school anymore. A few years ago, before I started my talk show host gig, good friends had a senior in high school that was thinking about going to law school. And he wanted me to take him and kind of show him around before he left for his bachelor's degree to see how it looked. So I cheated. I didn't do what everyone else, I didn't take him to meet the Chief Justice and the Speaker and things like that, people that he would never get a chance to talk with if he were a lawyer. But, that's kind of the way it's usually done. I didn't do that, so I took him and let him chat with some workaday lawyers, public defenders, people like that. Took him to lunch with some lawyers, and one of the guys who was in private practice said, I would never do it again. He said, I'm in debt $130,000. And he told me how much he's making. He's making close to 40. He said, it's just going to take me forever to come out of this. I would never do it. And the other folks at the table pretty much said the same thing. So my friend's son, lucky for him, decided he wanted to be an engineer instead of a lawyer. And I can't tell you how happy I am. Because if knowing what I know now, I would never do it. It's just too expensive. Okay, let me see who wants to talk to me about going to law school. Wolf M.S.
I apologize. I couldn't spell that last name.
Can you say it?
I couldn't say it either, but Mr. Wolf can.
Mr. Wolf, okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Wolf.
I'm Wolfgang Schwartz Weintraub.
Wolfgang?
And I'm a recent graduate of the University of Guam. I have a master's in counseling, community counseling at the professional level. I'm qualified to do therapy with returning veterans from Iraq and Iran and so on. And
do you want to sponsor Tall Tales, Wolfgang?
Huh?
Do you want to sponsor the program? Sounds like you're looking for some advertising here, but go ahead.
No, I'm trying to tell you the story about Guam University.
Well, go for it.
I graduated, and then they said I owe them another $7,800 because the tuition that I was given from the United States Department of Education was given to me under false pretenses. And they have my diploma since December. They won't give me my diploma so I can go to work.
Okay.
Try that one on.
Yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't sound so hot, Wolf. So
no, it doesn't.
What can you tell me about the denial? How was it that you ran afoul of the rules?
I didn't run afoul of the rules. I've contacted an ombudsman at the Department of Education back east, and they've told me that the allegations made by a collections officer at the Bank of Guam who tattled on me gave them false information. And they're preparing a letter now to send to the university, and they're going to refund the money that they demanded the university pay them for my misconduct. So,
well,
it's a very complicated situation, but I go to work at Bethesda as soon as I get this mess cleared up at the Naval Hospital, and my starting salary is $87,000 a year, and they're keeping me on this island here with no way to get off this island. I got to show the United States government, the Veterans Administration, a diploma. They have to see I have a diploma.
I got it.
That's one of their requirements.
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to jump in here. Jose, can you call the Bank of Guam and tell them I want to talk to Karen?
Right on it.
See, this loan, Bob, was a unsecured personal note that I defaulted on. I have every intentions of paying Lou every dollar I owe her. So, but I can't pay her. I'm living on Social Security.
Well, I think in a roundabout way, this comes back to what I started, the point I want to make. The national government has no business getting involved with people's college education. Had it not been so, you wouldn't be having the problem you're having.
Probably not. But I'm just saying, I thank the people of Guam for 4 years of education and about $4,500 a year for no tuition to pay. And I plan to come back here someday and teach. I want to teach at the university. I'll come back here when I have my doctorate. So
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I wish you the best of luck, Wolfgang, and I have faith that you'll be living in Bethesda, Maryland soon. And when you do, when you do, make sure you call us here as part of our international. Continue to be a tailgater and call us from Maryland, okay?
You better believe I will, especially those beautiful.
Okay, so there's Wolfgang, who had a kind of a sad story, and it's a little bit remote, but it's kind of like what I'm saying. You let the national government get involved, and a lot of times not such good things are going to happen. Okay, we'll take a short break here leading up to the big halftime show.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro on Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchase Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or make a reservation at the Guam Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sannicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Okay, so here we go. So much for the Tommy Cotney. Let me go now to the card, and the card is kind of loaded. I have to touch on the Daily News critical thinking and the abandonment thereof. And I suppose I had to give lip service to Hope Cristobal. But the really biggie here is Moylan and Bloss versus the United States Navy. I'm going to spend a lot of time on that. And it arises in the context of Resolution 56, which is an exercise in obfuscation in behalf of the separatists. And then I've got Barnes versus statehood, Nelson versus the SHPO, Rory versus drug paraphernalia, Michael Bavacqua versus Johnny Sablon. So let me get right into it. I got about 9 more minutes till the big halftime show begins. And I'm going to start right out with the biggest one, Moylan and Bloss versus the U.S. Navy. And there's a story that ran in the Post today, and I got to do my Rush Limbaugh interpretation again. You know, Jose, I don't like to talk about myself much on the show here, but this time I have to because it's about me. Yeah, this is an article that ran in the Post. The Guam legislature is considering a local resolution that backs an effort in the U.S. House to reject a series of century-old rulings from the Supreme Court called the Insular Cases. You've heard me talk about the Insular Cases before. I got to do it again. The cases dealt with the United States territories like Guam that were gained following the Spanish-American War, and how the federal government could administer, the story says, could administer over them. I think just administer them is what I mean to say. They allowed Congress to restrict rights to unincorporated territories by finding that all constitutional protections automatically extend to possessions like Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. Well, no. The Insular Cases said exactly the opposite, that they didn't automatically extend. Nice writing here. The Supreme Court at that time decided that the U.S. gets to do whatever it wants. No. that can treat those territories. If it gets really well, it can allow things to apply to them, or it can withhold things. It can deny them things. Quote, Michael Bavacqua, a member of the Commission on Decolonization, told the Daily Post. Of course. And if you're going to have something like this, who are you going to call? Michael Bavacqua. In the 1901 case of Downs versus Bidwell, which concerned import duties for Puerto Rico, no, it concerned import duties on goods imported from Puerto Rico. Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote in part, now this is the gaslighting. So if you don't know what gaslighting means, I'm going to show what it means. This is what I refer to as the Ann Hattori quote, and you'll understand why in a minute. Quote, if those possessions are inhabited by alien races differing from us in religion, customs, laws, methods of taxation, and modes of thought, the administration of government and justice according to Anglo-Saxon principles may for a time be impossible, and the question at once arises whether large concessions ought not to be made for a time, that ultimately our own theories may be carried out and the blessings of a free government under the Constitution extended to them. We decline to hold that there is anything in the Constitution to forbid such action. Now, the gaslighters will tell you that when Justice Brown was saying those things, he was talking about the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico, and Cuba. No. And if nothing else tips you off that that's not the case, it's the first word of the quotes. The first word of the quote is if. Where is it? Yeah, the first word of the quotes is if, okay, meaning it's conditional, if those colonies. So what Brown was talking about, and you'll see this when I get a little bit farther into the story, you have to read Downs as the beginning or the absolute acceptance of American colonialism, the American imperialism, because it's the beginning of the American empire. And Brown's quotation stands for the proposition of if we want to grab some other territory, we shouldn't be stuck with the principle that we got to take the Constitution with us. That's what he's saying. He's not saying that what he said applied to Guam, the Philippines, Cuba, or Puerto Rico. But you'll see when I get into the resolution, that's exactly what they want you to believe, and it just isn't true. The interesting thing about the insular cases is that the folks who speak most authoritatively about them are the ones who have never read them. Yeah. There were 6 cases decided in 1901 alone, including Downs. And depending on how you count what is and what isn't an insular case, you get up in about like 19 cases with exotic titles like 24 diamond rings versus the Philippines. Most of the cases arose in Puerto Rico. None had an application to Guam, and none have an application to Guam. So I just always have to point this out. That's not what Downs versus Bidwell said. And Ann Hattori is a historian at the university. Ann Hattori has a lot of responsibility for this gaslighting. We ought to be able to expect better from her because she's a university professor. University professors don't go to Wikipedia or someplace like that for research. They're supposed to go to source documents. So if she read Downs, she wouldn't say what she had said, which I'll get to later on in this part of the card. So going on with the going on with this article, the article says the racist language has long been used to challenge the treatment of U.S. territories, including House of Representatives Resolution 279, which is more of the same stuff. The resolution is framed as an official statement from the House of Representatives that recognizes and acknowledges Americans' constitutional and democratic principles apply throughout the United States, including both states and territories, which is true, with only a couple of exceptions, the Northern Marianas and American Samoa. In the Northern Marianas, the provision of the Voting Rights Act, or the one man, one vote principle does not apply, because in the Northern Marianas, the Senate is not proportionately districted. Rhoda has as many senators as Saipan does, violating which would not go in one of the states. The Northern Marianas, people in Northern Marianas descent are the only ones that can own fee simple title to land. And I'll get to this later on. But other than that, the full panoply of constitutional rights apply here, as they do in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I'm going to come back to this after the halftime show, and it may take me I don't know if I can even finish this today. It's such an important subject, and we're being done such a disservice by the media and by the gaslighters that I got to spend some time on this to get it straightened out.
In Mexico City, as an overpass on a commuter rail line failed just as a train was passing over it. The mayor of Mexico City says others may still be trapped in the train cars, a search for them suspended because the wreckage was too unstable. They're bringing in a crane to make it safe for rescuers. That rail line had been undergoing construction. Deadly storms in the southern U.S., leaving at least one person dead as 3 tractor-trailers toppled in high winds on I-35E south of Dallas. It may have been a tornado. 2 people have died in storms in Georgia.
Trees and the rain was just circling outside in the back. I didn't know what to do. I was just, watching to make sure, I wasn't going to get smushed by a tree hitting the house.
That woman in Douglasville, Georgia, where a restaurant owner was killed when a car crushed his SUV. A woman also died in Houston County, Georgia, when a tree fell on her home. The National Weather Service Severe Storms Prediction Center says much of the South, from Tennessee to Alabama, is at risk of severe weather again on Tuesday. A gunman who displayed a firearm near the gates of the CIA headquarters outside Washington was shot and wounded by FBI agents Monday evening. They've not released his name or his condition yet. President Biden quadrupled the country's refugee cap to more than 62,000 a year.
The White House is insisting that this was always the plan, that this is not an example of President Biden being pressured into something. But this has been the subject of intense debate here at the White House, with President Biden himself acknowledging that part of the reason he was initially reluctant to keep his campaign promise and raise the refugee cap was because of this ongoing surge of migrants at the border.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. The cap had been 15,000 under President Trump. Critics say it sends another signal to migrants that the U.S. southern border is open. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the way.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
These orders will bridge that gap. Private still have their own mask mandates and other rules, but counties cannot have them. Democratic leaders are highly critical. The mayor of St. Petersburg said local county measures saved the state, asking, could you imagine what the death toll would be and where the economy would be without local county measures? The new law also bans so-called vaccine passports. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
India's COVID-19 crisis continues, with deaths and infections still mounting at an alarming rate. They've surpassed 20 million total reported cases, but experts believe the number may be much higher because of troubles in the country's healthcare system, which is running out of supplies. Ohio State University says in new court filings it's planning an individual settlement program that could help resolve more of the remaining claims over alleged sexual misconduct by former team doctor Richard Strauss, the now deceased doctor accused of abusing hundreds of young men during his 2 decades at OSU. The school has already reached nearly $47 million in settlements for 185 plaintiffs. The country's top military commander dropping his opposition to a plan to change the way sexual assault cases in the military are handled.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says he is open to considering changes in how the military decides sexual assault prosecutions. In an interview with the Associated Press, Milley did not endorse specific changes but dropped opposition, saying the military hasn't effectively moved the needle. Bipartisan legislation in the Senate would move decision-making power on whether to bring sexual assault charges out of the hands of commanders. A Defense Department advisory panel is recommending similar changes. Jared Halbert, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro and Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchase Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or make a reservation at the Guam Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more.
On demand.
Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
Okay, so great halftime show once again, and we go from there right back to what I'm going to refer to as the Ann Hattori quote. So talking again about House Resolution 279, goes on to say it acknowledges that the insular cases are relics of the racial views of an earlier era that have no place in our nation today. Well, actually, that is exactly the opposite of the way things are in our nation today. If you can't talk about race, nobody wants to hear anything that you have to say. If you don't invoke racial equity, then you are obviously so far out to lunch that you run the risk of starving to death is a good example. Here's what Joe Biden, our president, gets praised for. Lower college costs for low and middle income students in historically black colleges, tribal colleges, institutions as Hispanic-speaking institutions, Asian American and Native Pacific Islander serving institutions, and other minority serving institutions. $9 billion investment to strengthen teacher pipelines and address shortages, increase the number of teachers of color, etc. So, you know, everything that you read about today is race-based. And, of course, it all goes back to George Floyd, right? George Floyd, I don't know if there's any truth to this rumor, but I understand that the remains of Gutzon Borglund have been exhumed, and they're trying to clone him so that he can carve this face of George Floyd on the side of Mount Rushmore. Yeah. So everything now is race-driven. And, of course, the tagline here is that, you know, systemic racism, and America is a racist country. And the way to fix it is with racism. And it makes a lot of sense. And this Resolution 279 in Congress is no different. It's the same thing. Let's get out the race card and play it, and then we can virtue signal that way, and then those folks who are members of those particular minorities will support us in the polls, and we can continue to stay in Congress. I have a feeling that the same thing applies in our local legislature. Then the article goes on to say, the lone Republican support of the congressional resolution comes from the non-voting delegate from Puerto Rico. Now, what would she know about anything, right? Coming from Puerto Rico, which is where Downs versus Bidwell came from. All right. Then the next subheading, impact on taxation and revenue. And the article says, but critics are wrongly fixated on this single piece of the cases, argues former senator and judge, and here's a name here, Bob Klitzkie, Klizkie.
It rings a bell.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to have to do is adopt the Chamorro orthography to prevent misspellings in the future. So henceforth, I'm going to spell my name Kliy apostrophe I. And let me take you through that. K is the same, L is the same, I is the same. The TZ sound, you use Y, right? As in Maurizo, right? And the hard K there, that's the apostrophe, the glottal stop, and then I, Kliy apostrophe E, would be Klitzkie, as opposed to Klitzkie, as it is in the editorial here. Now, if the reporter can't spell the name of his informer correctly, does that have anything to do with the accuracy of the rest of the name of the rest of the article?
Was this informer meant to be anonymous?
Say again?
Was this informer meant to be anonymous?
Yeah, I should have been anonymous. Yeah, if I had said, if I just quote me as anonymous, it probably would have been a double, it would have been twice as long, right? Yeah, but critics are wrongly fixated on this single piece of the cases, argues former Senator and Judge Bob Klitzkie. He told the Post that the effects of the case law far outweigh one quote from one decision. Of course, the language people quote is so incendiary and fits so well into the colonizer frame of reference that people can't let it go. And it gets repeated so often. So people see it in Wikipedia or someplace like that and say, I guess that's right. Okay? The quote, well, it's not right, but that's the only the only place that this article touches on what I think is the key issue, that's not what Downs said. Then he goes on to say, Guam could see additional taxation and the loss of Section 30 revenue if the insular cases are struck down, according to Klitzkie, which is what I explained at the beginning here. Because the only thing that Downs did was to say that the uniformity clause of the U.S. Constitution did not apply in the conquered territories. That means that we don't have to pay federal income tax. But if Downs were overruled, we would send our taxes to the Treasury, no more mirror, and everything that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. The insular cases allow for greater flexibility. In American Samoa, people are not citizens by birth like they are here, which is what the people in Samoa like. The upper house of their government is composed of traditional chiefs or people put there by the chiefs, Klitzkie said. That would never pass muster if the Constitution applied. In the Northern Marianas, the one man, one vote rule doesn't apply. The upper house of their legislature is grossly disproportionate. Rota has as many senators as Saipan. That would never fly if the Constitution applied in whole. So I come here to say to the whole island of Guam and our entire international radio listening audience, Downs versus Biswell is the best friend that we have. It's not a racist decision. People use that one quote to gaslight you all, and if you hear anybody justifying that position based on that quote, they're lying to you. Can I make it any plainer than that? Okay. So let me tell you who the sponsors of this resolution are. Tina Rose Munia Barnes, that great constitutional scholar. I suspect that Tina drafted this all by herself. Clinton E. Rigel, Jose Pido Terlahi, Joe S. San Augustine. Now, you don't see the one lawyer in the legislature. You don't see her name on there, Therese Terlahi. Now, I'm coming to the cleanup hitters here. James Camacho Moylan and Frank F. Bloss Jr. And that's why I put this on the card as Moylan and Bloss versus the U.S. Navy. So, of course, Frank Bloss was one of the people that fought the return to a normal salary after the Juan Pat 10 and the great salary grab. I haven't forgotten that, and I haven't forgiven it, and he has not come forward and confessed like Duenas did, like Chris Duenas did.
No repentance.
And then James Camacho Moylan, who in the last legislature came forward and distinguished himself because he was woke with his hate crime bill. And I didn't let him forget that, but, being woke is bad. This is worse. Because you guys, Moylan and Bloss, have now signed up with the separatists. So if you'd like to see Guam separate from the United States, make sure you contribute to Moylan and Bloss. Make sure you vote for them, work in their campaigns, help them out however you can, because they signed up with the separatists, if that's what you want. Okay, so going back here to I wrote a letter to the editor for the Daily News that I think I've read before, so I'll just pick parts of it out here because it makes the point pretty clearly. And it goes like this. In response to a Daily News editorial from October 12, the punchline from a TV comedy show is a rather shallow foundation upon which to build an editorial dealing with a serious subject. The glaringly false statement was uttered by Guam historian Ann Paris Hattori on the TV show called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I've asked you this before, Jose, but have you ever seen that TV show? I think it's out there somewhere in the bowels of YouTube.
It's like a show masquerading as a show, but
Yeah,
it's really satire.
it takes current events and makes them funny. So Ann Paris Hattori was a straight man. She was the Bud Abbott for
Oliver.
Yeah, for John Oliver's Lou Costello. She was a straight man, and this is what she said. She was quoted on national television saying this: "The United States flag is flying over these lands." So some people said, "Well, doesn't that mean that American laws apply?" In 1901, the Insular cases, basically the judgment of the Supreme Court, the territories were inhabited by alien, quote, alien races, and they may not be able to understand Anglo-Saxon laws. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. She didn't even get the quote right. And this is on, now she teaches, she's a professor of history at the university. And shortly before this, Robert Underwood he was writing a column, and he talked about academic freedom. And he said, academic freedom is different from freedom of speech. It incorporates freedom of speech. Professors are free to speak out on topics of public interest, but we have to be able to depend on them to be accurate. So she comes out with crap like this on national television.
It's that thing where people apply their understanding of language today to what was said decades ago.
Well, even if that were the case, but, you know, she's a historian, so you'd expect her to read Downs versus Bidwell, like I did. Instead of, and, you know, some people, when I've explained this to people, one of the responses I got was, well, she was cherry picking. And I say, no, that's not cherry picking. That's horse apple picking. If you ever spend time on a farm in Wisconsin, you know what a horse apple is, Jose. All right, so my letter goes on to say, Hattori, a Guam historian, condensed 147 pages of United States Supreme Court opinion into 38 words and presented that 38-word quote as the ratio decidendi, and not a hypothetical oberdictum that it really was. Ratio decidendi, reason for decision. Oberdictum, some other language that doesn't count into the decision. The three concurring opinions from which the court's ruling was derived employed different rationales which yielded the holding in Downs, none of which relied on Guam historian Hattori's 38 words to reach a result. Hattori's statement smacks of a degree of sophistry that is perhaps fitting for a TV comic, but not coming from a university professor who we should be able to take seriously. I would never, you know, if she said, "Good morning, Bob," I'd look at my watch. I would never take her seriously. And the other key, in the case Downs versus Bidwell, as it were, Downs and Company was an importer who sued the collector of customs for New York to recover $659.35 paid in duty for the import of some bananas. Now, he paid George R. Bidwell, the customs collector for New York. Downs turned on the determination of whether the Foraker Act, which was Puerto Rico's Organic Act, passed constitutional muster. The Downs decision held only that the uniformity clause of the Constitution didn't apply. And here's how the uniformity clause reads. I read it at the beginning of the show. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, and excises, to pay the debts, etc., but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Okay? And Downs held that that was not applicable in the newly acquired territories. Now, if it had been, then the territories would have had the same tax structure, et cetera, as the states did. Here's the holding in Downs. We are therefore of the opinion that the island of Puerto Rico is a territory appurtenant and belonging to the United States, but not part of the United States within the revenue clauses of the Constitution. The Foraker Act is constitutional so far as it imposes duties upon imports from such island, and that the plaintiff cannot recover back the duties exacted in this case. The judgment of the circuit court is therefore affirmed. So this is a commercial case. It deals with growing, shipping, importing bananas and paying duty on them. Downs dealt with customs duties, not voting, and not with the inapplicability of the Constitution in Puerto Rico and other things, due to the presence of alien races there. This is just so disappointing coming from a university professor. The alien races wordage is obiter dictum, doesn't apply to Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines, or Guam, and is stated only hypothetically. Inability of residents of the territories to vote, not to vote, does not stem from the insular cases, but from the design of the American Republic, where civil rights have a national dimension, but political rights arise from residents in one of the 50 states. Voting rights in national elections is not unavailable because of the insular cases, which is what the Daily News said. The Pacific Daily News statement, quote, given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied based on the insular cases. You know, when you read something like this in a newspaper of general circulation, it's frightening. It is frightening. That's not only dead wrong, but is very similar to the arguments that attempt to gaslight Guam's position in the American system in order to enhance the argument for a Guam that is independent of the United States. It's just amazing. So I'm working on a response to the article that appeared in the Daily News, and so far all I've put together is the first sentence of my own letter to the editor, and it reads like this: it's easier to believe a lie that one has heard 1,000 times than to believe a fact that one has never heard before. Michael Lind. And that's where we are. This lie about the anhatory language has been told told in the newspaper of generals. It advances the reason that we're not voting for president. Picked up by the Michael Bavacqua, Lola Leon Guerrero, and that whole outfit, all of the separatists, racism. And then, of course, critical race theory, that means that injustice has to be undone, like the quote that I read from Melvin Wanpat yesterday. So this is really something. Now, I have the resolution here, and if you have your nose plugs from swimming, put them on before I start reading. You don't use earplugs, but this really smells. And here it goes. Whereas Guam is a United States territory that was acquired by the United States by the Treaty of Paris, which as a result ended the Spanish-American War, and whereas the native inhabitants of Guam, the Chamorro people, have been subject to colonization without consent by the Spanish, well, that's kind of the way it is with colonization. Spanish, Japanese Imperial Army in the United States, whereas the United States has provided tremendous support to Guam in our efforts to rebuild after World War II, and more recently in response to Wuhan virus, the fundamental rights of Guamanians have been squandered. Fundamental rights. Now, fundamental rights has a particular meaning. It isn't something you throw around at the corner of the bar. Have been squandered by a series of non-democratic policies imposed by the United States. Non-democratic here means policies we don't like. Whereas while Guam is home to some of the most patriotic Americans who come from generations of service members and has some of the highest rates of enlistments in the United States Air Force, the sons of daughters of Guam who fought alongside their fellow American soldiers have been systematically denied the rights to liberty and freedom. Yeah. Systematically denied the rights to liberty and freedom, which they were fighting for as a result of early 20th century Supreme Court decisions known as the Insular cases. Systematically denied liberty and freedom.
What happens if they move to California?
Then they get their liberty and freedom back.
The system's broken then.
Yeah, right. Systematically denied. Whereas the Insular cases are made up of 6 Supreme Court decisions, DeLima versus Bidwell, Getz versus the United States, Dooley versus the United States, Armstrong versus the United States, Downs versus Bidwell, and Hewis versus New York, which ultimately was based on the strong undercurrents of racial bias that permeated U.S. society at that time. And you know that because you were alive at the time, Tana Rose Munya Barnes. Whereas while the United States prides itself as a nation that broke away from the unjust colonization of the British, and the Founding Fathers had crafted a system of governance that promotes equality, freedoms, and a series of fundamental human rights, no. We don't have any human rights in our Constitution. All of the rights in our Constitution are negative rights. They're not stuff. There's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what the Constitution is going to do for you. The Bill of Rights tell you what the government's not going to do to you. Good going there, constitutional scholar Tina Rose. Whereas while the United States, as you were, the Insular cases, which became the law of the land as it relates to the territories, outlined that the racial superiority of the controlling political entity justified their manifest destiny policies. We were done with manifest destiny by the time of the Insular cases, Tina Rose. Whereas specifically in the judgment of Downs versus Bidwell, Justice Henry Billings Brown. Now, here comes Ann Paris Hattori again. If she said it, she's a historian, and she said it on national TV, so it must be right. Henry Billings Brown that stated that the territories were, quote, inhabited by alien races differing from us in religion, customs, and modes of thought, thus making the people of Guam impossible to govern. And they skipped out of the quote there, right?
That says none of that.
Yeah. According to Anglo-Saxon, and they don't even get the quote right. You know, they have to jazz up the quote to make it fit the narrative. So this is all really bad stuff. It's wrong, it's propaganda, and it's advanced for a narrative and for an agenda. And it goes from bad to worse. Whereas the United States Navy, in its U.S. Navy report on Guam, and then it says 1899 to 1950. Now, I haven't seen that report, but apparently it covers the period of naval administration up through 1950. That's what they want us to think. I haven't seen it. There's no any kind of citation to it, but they go on to say, describe the people of Guam as savages who needed to be transformed in the mind, and it was the responsibility of the U.S. Navy to the Guamanians to guide them from disease-ridden medieval peonage to the dignity and demeanor of a healthy, self-reliant citizenry in the modern world. Well, I'd like to see that. It's the first I've ever heard of it, and I spent a lot of time horsing around with this kind of stuff. So I'd like a citation to it. And if we had that, then we could discuss it in some kind of a context. But let's go to the seventh inning stretch, and then I'll come back to Moylan and Blas versus the U.S. Navy.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
All dads should own a Traeger, and this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76circlekguam.com.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. Now, this so-called Navy report, right? And we come back to it. Well, another one of the whereas clauses said, whereas the same Chamorro people whom the U.S. Navy had called savages, as part of the resolution here, the U.S. Navy called these people savages. I harp about this a lot. You know, the U.S. Navy can't talk. There are people who are in the United States Navy who can talk. And there are spokesmen for the United States Navy. So if you had some seaman deuce who said the people of Guam are savages, I don't think it's really very important. And I'll tell you how this can be used, you know, this device of ascribing what one person said to a whole organization. If I said something like this, you know, the United States Supreme Court said that people who aren't very smart should be sterilized. Yeah. Did you ever hear of Oliver Wendell Holmes?
That's the one who would be quoted then.
Yeah. Oliver Wendell Holmes, one of our famous Supreme Court, some people think the best, in a case versus Buck versus Bell, which dealt with non-consensual sterilization, said 3 generations of idiots are enough. So it's fair to say, you know, the Supreme Court says, you know, that people who aren't very smart are idiots and they should be sterilized. Did that happen? Did he say that? Did a justice say that? Was it in an opinion? Did it happen? Yeah. Does it stand for anything? No. Is it honest to use that as a tool of persuasion? It's what we call the D word. It's called demagoguery. If you want an example of demagoguery, it's right here, Resolution 56. Going on. Whereas as a result of the mindset imposed by Downs versus Bidwell. Now, I've read all 182 pages of it. It doesn't impose any mindset on anybody except the person who can't read, who might say, gosh, I wish I could read. The U.S. Navy had imposed its own system of naval government. Well, it wasn't Downs versus Bidwell. What it was is this. According to the law of nations, when one nation conquers the territory of another, that territory is under military control until there's a surrender. Then the disposition of the territory is governed by whatever treaty there is between the belligerents. The Treaty of Paris said that the people of Guam would be subject to their political status and personal rights would be addressed by the Congress. Well, Congress didn't address it, so the island was run by the president as commander-in-chief of the armed forces until 1950. Really had nothing to do whatsoever. Had Downs versus Bidwell gone the other way, it still would have been the same. But you don't have to know what you're... The nice thing about demagoguery is you don't really have to know what you're talking about. All you need to do is throw out the inflammatory language and you've done your work. Okay, so because of the insular cases, local school children were punishing because they spoke native Chamorro language. That's what it says. You know, really reading this, maybe it's time to go back to the Naval Administration if this is the best we can do.
I'm looking for a kitchen sink.
Really. Whereas approximately 20,000 Chamorros, the same Chamorro people whom the U.S. Navy had called savages, and the insular cases deemed to be unfit to be Americans. Wow. Were subjected to death, rape, severe personal injury, et cetera, by the Imperial Japanese military as a result of their proud allegiance to the United States. And whereas the same Chamorro people whom the U.S. Navy had called savages and the insular cases deemed unfit to be called Americans had embodied the ancient Chamorro spirit of Inafamaldic by opening up our island as though one has anything to do with the other. And then the next whereas, Admiral Manoni gave Lou a decoration, etc. Whereas even the United Nations have made clear through a joint allegation letter, and that's, of course, that's not the United Nations, it's the three rapporteurs, that there's still ongoing human rights violations suffered by the indigenous Chamorro people of Guam at the hands of the United States government and military. Whereas the recent United States federal court case, Davis versus Guam, the courts have again reaffirmed, here's a real whopper. You know, if we were giving out Pinocchios, we'd be up to about 40 Pinocchios by now, Jose.
That's just completely wrong.
Whereas the recent United States federal court case of Davis versus Guam, the courts have reaffirmed that while rights provided to Americans under the Constitution do not apply to the native inhabitants of Guam, they do apply to a certain class which the courts deem favorable to the United States. You know, if you said this in court, you'd be skirting the edges of perjury.
No wonder Senator Therese Terlahi didn't put her name to this.
Yeah.
Good job.
And no wonder Moylan and Bloss did.
Embarrassing.
It's music to their ears. Yeah, separatists, Moylan and Bloss. Whereas H.R. 279 is introduced by and then it talks about this silly resolution, etc. And then it says that silly resolution, congressional resolution, is the first step to rectify injustices imposed on the people of Guam by the United States. Well, of course, the resolution isn't going to rectify anything. You don't get the Supreme Court to overturn a ruling by sending them a resolution. And when I go to that part of the resolution, you know, we're sending it to San Nicolas, Pelosi, Leahy, Grijalva, Sablon, Plaskett, Garcia, Snow White, 4 of the dwarves, Goldilocks, 1 bear, and the governor, and finally, penultimately, Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr., Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So the way you get the Supreme Court to change the is you send a resolution, an absolutely BS resolution to the Chief Justice, and we're paying for this? We're paying these people $55,554 a year to come up with crap like this? It's amazing. So, resolved that the Committee on Rules does hereby, on behalf of Legislature and Guam and the people of Guam, on your behalf, Jose, and my behalf, affirm the need for Congress to, 1, recognize that America's constitutional and democratic principles apply throughout the United States, including both states and territories, which it does, with the 2 exceptions that I mentioned, which the people in those territories want. Acknowledge that the insular cases are contrary to the text and history of the Constitution. Wrong. Acknowledge the insular cases are relics of the racial views of an earlier era that have no place in our nation today. Dead wrong. Reject the insular cases and their application to all present and future cases and controversies involving the application of the United States territories. Kiss the mirror image of the taxes goodbye and all that stuff. 5, show the people of Guam the same spirit of Inafamalik our people have shown to the United States. Yeah, we really have. You know, we've accepted all of this money that they sent out here in the pandemic. We haven't sent any of it back.
I would even submit that their concept of Inafamalik is different from the traditional ancient concept of Inafamalik.
It is indeed.
It's a modernized version. Dare I say a colonized version?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. So that's the resolution. And what a disappointment, you know, with important things to be done to engage in this. And of course, it is all to pander to the separatists. So you guys who want to live in an independent Guam, I'm going to make this public service announcement. I understand, I'm holding my arm up in the air here, I understand that Michael Bavacqua, Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero, Senators Frank Blas Jr. and Jim Moylan are going to hold a rally at the Chief Kipua statue Friday noon in support of this resolution. They're asking that everyone bring their passports with them, and they're all going to burn their passports as a method of protesting this horrible American colonization of Guam and their support for this resolution, and to show how much they hate Downs versus Bidwell. Yeah. Come on, guys, go burn your passports. You know, I was around in the 60s and the early 70s when people were burning their graft cards. Women were burning their bras. I never burned my jock straps. Although nowadays that would be seen as a form of virtue signaling. You know, having a jock strap for a tranny would be seen as a form of virtue signaling rather than protest. But I never burned my jock strap. So that's the way you protested things. You burn things. So let's get with it here. All you guys, all you folks out there, all you separatists, all you America, the colonizer, etc., all you folks that are working for the colonizer's government, get your passports out. You know, they wouldn't burn really easily. The covers are kind of heavy cardboard. You might have to squirt a little lighter fluid on it, but you could do it. You could burn them up. Yeah, and you know, in order to not be a United States citizen, what you have to do, Jose, you have to go to a consulate of the United States, which means you have to go to a foreign country. And if you go to a consulate of the United States, fill out some papers, you're interviewed by a consular officer, you can renounce your United States citizenship. And I haven't seen the numbers, but I expect that the numbers of people from Guam heading for consular services to do that is just overwhelming.
Where is the office here?
You can't do it here.
But this is where we're not the United States, though, right?
Say again?
A consulate would only be in a place that's not the United States.
That's right. Yeah. So, you wonder how long people can go along telling the big lie over and over again. Of course, I got on the post yesterday for telling the big lie, but how long you can go on telling the big lie before people wake up? And the answer probably is they aren't going to wake up until somebody comes along and wakes them up. And I see that's my job. Wake up out there, folks. These folks are tricking you. They're gaslighting you. And as I said, some portions of this resolution, if they were said in open court, would skirt the boundaries of perjury. Okay, well, let me take one more. Let me head for Churchill Downs before we finish up the show today.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro on Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchase Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or make a reservation at the Guam Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
So here we go. Home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. And if you want to read Downs versus Bidwell, and I recommend that you at least get it started on it, it's 182 pages long, whereas Ann Hattori was able to distill it down to 38 words. Of course, she did it wrong, but that doesn't matter, right? So if you were to go to, let me see here. What's the citation for Downs versus Bidwell? Yeah, if you were to just type in Downs, D-O-W-N-E-S-V period Bidwell, B-I-D-W-E-L-L, it'll take you to a couple of sites where the whole case is available. And when you get to the case, turn to page 287, and you'll find the key language right around there, which I have, which I'm going to spend a little time on. Because it makes it absolutely clear that the Paris interpretation of the case is dead wrong. So it starts out, there's a provision that new states may be admitted to Congress into this union. These words, of course, carry the Constitution with them, but nothing is said regarding the acquisition of new territories or the extension of the Constitution over them. The liberality of Congress in legislating the Constitution into all our contiguous territories has undoubtedly fostered the impression that it went there by its own force. But there's nothing in the Constitution itself and little in the interpretation put upon it to confirm that impression. In other words, the continental territories, the Constitution applied there because Congress said it applied there, not because the Constitution of its own force applied there. There's nothing, not even an analogy to the provisions of an ordinary mortgage for its attachment to after-acquired property. You know, I think I'll just stop here for a second and see what I got in the green room. Another Joe. Well, I'll entertain another Joe. I'm going to have to spend more time on this tomorrow. This is such an important subject. I just can't oh, wait a minute. Yeah. I just can't overemphasize how important this is, and that everyone understand the lies that are floating around there in the name of scholarship. Okay, so let me see what another Joe has got to say about tell me about the insular cases, another Joe.
Heck, about, it seems to me you could write a curriculum teach a class, fact-checking class regarding Downs versus Bidwell, which I think would be a good influence on all the so-called educators and historians of Guam history. And I think it would be to everyone's benefit.
Well, thanks for the kind words, another Joe. But of course, you know, the separatists don't want that to happen. The separatists are always saying, you know, Congress needs to give us money for an educational campaign. When they're talking educational campaign, they're not talking straight talk like I'm talking, that actually read the decision and read the decision for what it's worth. What they're talking about is we need to educate the people of Guam about our narrative. They don't understand how badly they've been treated by the United States. They don't understand what a horrible place they're in because Guam is an unincorporated territory. That's what they mean by teaching. And the separatists, Michael Bavacqua, Victoria Lola, Leon Guerrero, people of that ilk, their worst nightmare would be someone like me having a regular class to teach the truth, because that's cross purposes with what they're doing.
Yep. But, you know, the truth will go further for everyone, including the separatists, because, like you said, if anyone ever fact checks, that's the end of their narrative. So for them to build a better case, they need to come up with better, actual facts and details.
But
so I just want,
you know, we have facts, another Joe, and we have knowledge. And a lot of times what passes for knowledge for many people, if not most of the people, is what I call the everybody knows phenomenon, right? Everybody knows. At one time, everybody knows that the world is flat, right? Everybody knows that if you get a raise, you might wind up paying more taxes because you go into a higher bracket. Everybody knows that the insular cases were racist. And because of the insular cases, Guam continually gets the fuzzy end of the lollipop. Everybody knows that. And it's like my Michael Lind case, quote, "It's easier to believe a lie that a person has heard 1,000 times than to believe a fact that one has never heard before." And everybody's heard this insular case and Hattori rap 1,000 times. And unless they're amongst the intelligentsia that tune in to Tall Tales at 1600 on Monday through Friday, they probably haven't been exposed to the truth.
The truth will set them free.
Yeah,
well, share this link, share this station, share this program, and then everybody will know.
Exactly. And everybody who's out there, every tailgater out there, you know, I would assign a duty to. And the duty is to tell people, don't be gaslighted by this racist doctrine of the separatists. And if you really want to be separated from the United States, then support them. Support Boylan, support Bloss, support the separatists. But if you don't, even if you do, but you don't want to be hoodwinked into it, don't buy the stuff that they're teaching because it's wrong.
Yep. About and what was it? I think the Germans have a term, Besserwisser. They know better. Is that
say again?
Besserwisser. Know better. Is that the translation to knowing better? And Besserwisser.
I'm not hearing you right.
Besserwisser. Ein Besserwisser.
Oh, in German?
Mm-hmm.
Nicht gesprochen Deutsche.
We might have Wolfgang call back.
Yeah, mit der Herr Wolfgang. Deutsche.
Nicht sprechen Deutsch. Okay, come on, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, good talking to you, another Joe. Yeah, so, I've been really emphatic here. And I tell you almost every day, I don't come along and tell you I'm going to be fair and even-handed, and I'm going to give everybody an even break and give people the benefit of the doubt, etc. When you tune into Tall Tales, you get the Bob version of things. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to tell you something that I know is untrue, that's false, that's wrong, that's demagogic. So I hope you can come back tomorrow, because I'm not quite finished here with Resolution 56, Senators Blas and Moylan. Hope to see you then. Adios.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Hoping to resume the search, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A large crane is being maneuvered into place at the scene of a railroad bridge collapse in Mexico City. This to shore up the wreckage enough for rescue workers to resume their search for people who may be trapped inside at least 2 train cars left dangling precariously. 20 people have been killed, dozens more hospitalized. A swath of severe weather Monday in the south has left at least 3 people dead, including a motorist outside Atlanta.
High winds here in the city of Douglasville that brought down a large tree onto the roadway. Unfortunately, a prominent restaurant owner was driving at the time. That tree crushed his SUV and killed him.
Doug Evans of Atlanta's Fox 5. A woman in Houston County, Georgia, south of Macon, died when a tree fell on her home. In Waxahachie, Texas, south of Dallas, at least 1 person died when storms toppled 3 tractor trailers onto a highway. There were tornado watches in the area at the time. The National Weather Service says 11 million people live in an area where there is a heightened risk of severe weather today. An FBI agent opened fire on an armed man outside CIA headquarters in Virginia last night, wounding the man whom the Bureau said had emerged from his vehicle with a weapon. The suspect's condition isn't known yet. The Bureau says that suspect had a confrontation earlier at the agency's security gate. The number of refugees being allowed into the country this year is being raised to 62,500 at President Biden's direction. Former President Trump had capped the refugee number at 15,000 per year. Wall Street closing Monday mixed. The Dow gained 238 points. The S&P 500 added 11, but NASDAQ lost 67 points. Now futures trading nearly flat. Asian stock markets closing Tuesday mixed. America is listening to Fox News.